Welcome to another episode of the Back to School Shootings podcast. My name is David Reedman. I'm the creator of the K through 12 school shooting database. On the show today, I would like to welcome back the guest from episode 42, Officer Seth Capps. The very first episode was School Policing in Texas is 24/7, and it is more than 24/7 because we're going to start off by talking about the biggest news in Texas from the past couple weeks, and that is the historic flooding that happened in that state. Officer Capps, you were just in Kerrville. What is the school police officer doing out there?
Yeah, that's right, man. It's incredible to be a part of an incredible community, even when tragedy strikes. Outside of what could have been done to prevent it, what could have been done, ahead of time, and all the conversations that are now taking place beyond that, even within school systems, especially when it comes to severe weather, because that can be a very very controversial topic, but also a very important one because that's outside of school shootings. I mean, the more likelihood of severe weather is 10 times what you would ever imagine when it comes to a real threat to a school campus that happens regularly and pretty frequently, especially here in Texas. So, being a part of a community that was willing to step up, our community put together our police chief, he called me weekend before last, and he said, "Man, we got to do something." And I said, "Yeah, you're right." And our first thought was, I'm water survival trained just from past experiences, and I said, "Man, go find me a John boat and let's head that way." And that was just that was just extreme reaction. We just wanted to get down there and help, and the same way a lot of people did. And after sleeping on it and thinking through it, he called me back. He said, "Hey, what if we do this? Let's advertise as best we can around the community here and around East Texas." And he said, "Let's set up a donation drive at the school in the stadium parking lot where there's plenty of room. We've got the band trailers from, we've got a state championship marching band here at our school. And so they've got 3 massive trailers. They haul all their equipment into competitions, and the band director got on board. So it started out with just, hey, we're going to hook trucks up to those 3 trailers, pull them into the parking lot, and if we fill one of them, that's better than nothing. And then we'll make a run down there and take them, see if we can get them to who needs it." By
And
7,
just to set, so where you are in Mineola, Mineola ISD, you're about 2 hours east of Dallas, like between Dallas and Shreveport on I-20, right? So you're a pretty good distance from there.
Yeah, it took us, especially hauling the trailers, it took us about 7.5 hours to make the drive down. It's probably closer to 6.5 in a car, just driving, but it took us every bit of 7.5, maybe even closer to 8. It was pretty good. We left about 5 o'clock that morning. I think we got down there just after 1:30 in the afternoon. So, and then we unloaded, did some, just helping those guys unload, get everything sorted where they needed to. And then we broke bread with them just to, they were, most of the guys that were helping unload trailers were taking a break. They'd already worked shifts down in the riverbed that morning. And so we just gave them a minute to talk about something other than what they were seeing, and broke bread with them. And then we got back on the road to head back north. And
what kind of supplies were you able to drop off down there?
Oh man, let's see. We ended up filling 4 full trailers. We had a citizen here. He's actually not even from Mineola, just from Wood County, from our area. He drove up to drop off a pallet of hand sanitizer that his company produced. And before he got done leaving the parking lot, he had circled back around and he said, "Man, I can't leave without offering this." He said, "I've got a 36-foot enclosed trailer, triple axle." He said, "I got a truck that'll pull it, and I've got time on my hands. If you need more room, I'll go with you." And so we called him back about 30 minutes later. We had filled the 3rd trailer. And I said, "Hey, were you serious?" And he said, "Absolutely." So I said, "Well, hook up and come on." So he hooked his trailer up and came and parked it in the parking lot. And I'll be danged if we didn't fill that one too. So we took 4 30-plus foot trailers, double and triple axle trailers down there, and then a 5th one that Ozarka has a plant here locally in Wood County, and their factory donated 7 pallets of water. So we took 7 pallets of water and 4 full trailers of everything from clothes, food, non-perishables, water, sports drinks, things you wouldn't even think of, like plates, forks, knives, a little bit of everything. The way we put it out was, these people a week ago they had homes, and today they have nothing. But the clothes they were wearing, and in some cases not even that. And with the first responders we were coordinating with on the ground, we initially started with Red Cross and Salvation Army, but very quickly we realized that we were going to be playing the same federal, money grabbing donation games with those guys. So through the incident commander, through the Department of Public Safety, we were put in contact with a local uh, rescue station there, the Mountain Home Fire and Rescue outpost there, and they're located just off the river valley there in right in Kerrville, right in the heart of where the worst part of it was. They put us in touch with the chief there, and so at this time, the Salvation Army was starting to tell people they were running out of room for donations. Oh, we don't need any more water. And when we got in touch with them, this guy said, I don't know what they're talking about. We need everything, and we need it now. And so he asked us if we could come straight in to right to where they were, not to stop at one of the donation centers. And so he gave us a kind of turn by turn directions of how to get there and how to avoid the chaos of the traffic and all the clusters getting through the areas of the hill country there, and how we could get to where they were. So we took it. We probably went about 100 miles out of the way from a direct route to be able to get down to where the Mountain Home Fire and Rescue Station was there inside Kerrville. And we went directly to that fire station where the first responders were, and dropped off all of these supplies. And things like pillows, stuffed animals, coloring books for kids. Just a little bit of everything you can think of: tools, rakes, shovels, camping equipment, tarps. We took suitcases of nothing but blankets that people brought. Everything under the sun that you just look around your house and we don't even think twice about. These are all things they have nothing of. And so we took a little bit of all of it and then spent a little time down there. And I'll tell you, one of the coolest things I think that really makes you proud to be from an area like this is when we got down there to that rescue station. We were met by several firefighters, first responders that had been working down there for several days. And these guys, they're coming up. They've got waiters over in the corner dripping wet. They're all running around in basketball shorts and T-shirts, just taking a rest. Guys sleeping in the back. There's probably 50 or 60 of them. And looking at their shirts, we started to realize that this was not Mountain Home Fire and Rescue firefighters we were dealing with. A few of them were. There were people from the DFW area, from Conroe, from College Station, from Grand Prairie. There were probably 15 or 16 different fire stations represented in the handful of volunteers that we got to deal with when we were down there. And they were all of the same mind. We got here as quick as we could.
And I think that's really important, thinking about just school preparedness anywhere, personal preparedness anywhere, is that you can't have enough water. You cannot have enough bottled water. If you have any type of flooding, power loss, hurricane, thinking about when I responded down to Hurricane Katrina or Hurricane Ike in 2008 in East Texas, if you don't have municipal water and you don't have power, you use bottled water for washing, for every time you're brushing your teeth, doing dishes. If it's hot, you're sweating all day, you're trying to just kind of clean yourself off with it. So you can never get too much water down to a disaster location. And then just that same piece, that every single type of item can end up being something that's really profoundly useful, but not just showing up to a place, having a coordinated effort that we're going to interface through an official channel. We're going to do this because after school shootings, after storms, all kinds of unsolicited help comes. But if you have resources, you can get them somewhere quickly, and you can go through an official channel to make sure you're getting them to the right place, you can have a profound impact on people's lives.
Well, I think that was a big part of it was being able to kind of cut through the red tape of the big donation game, and all the profiteers that make money off of things like this, and get directly to the people who actually needed it was huge. Because when we got there, Mercy Ships had been providing them with some hot meals, and they had a snack table, basically, crackers and cookies and chips and things like that some locals had dropped off. And other than that, they had 2 pallets of water that were and some Gatorade mixed that had been delivered about 48 hours prior to that, and they were down to about maybe 20 cases left, and that's all that that was the only thing that station had been provided at all yet. One of the biggest ones I know that they were grateful for was we filled one entire trailer. And I keep saying we didn't do this. This was our community that stepped up and did this, but they filled an entire trailer full of nothing but baby supplies: the diapers, wipes, formula, Desitin, Aquaphor, things for diaper rashes, blankets, the baby blankets. We took several car seats got donated and things like that. And we separated it in its trailer specifically and said, hey, we'll start this trailer with baby stuff where we know where it's at when we get down there, because we'll know that's something they want to have separate. And we ended up filling the whole trailer with nothing but baby stuff. And so when we got there and we showed them that, they were over the moon. We met a couple of pediatricians that were down there volunteering, and they were helping sort it out, and because they already kind of knew some places it needed to go. And one of them that I had a conversation with, and I said, I just hope this goes, a long way. I hope it goes where it's needed. And she said, yeah, oh, it will. She said, honestly, if any of it's left 48 hours from now, I'll be surprised. She said, that's how bad they need it.
Yeah, well, that's great work down there, and glad you all could make an impact on that. And then you pretty much went straight from driving 8 hours across the state to, even though it's summertime and you think summertime is when you can rest and relax and take a vacation and, the school year's over. When we were trying to schedule this episode today, you were in substitute teacher training. And I thought, this is cool. Like, for a small school district, they have the school resource officers trained as substitute teachers, so that, if a teacher calls in sick, then Seth can fill in the classroom there. But it was actually, you were doing emergency preparedness training for substitute teachers, right?
Correct. So we started doing this about 4 years ago, just kind of seeing the writing on the wall. We didn't want subs that were working in our district not to be aware of our safety protocols and what to do in the case of an emergency. So we started putting a sub training together. It takes about 4 hours. And they're actually, if they put a packet in to come substitute teach for our district, they're required to make it to one of those trainings, or else they're not allowed to go on the list to be called. So in that, what we do is we do kind of a modified version of alerts, civilian response to an active shooter event. So we go through CRAZE training with them. And we talk about those things, and then we kind of go in depth on the standard response protocol, standard reunification, and then our individual policies and procedures here at our district and what that looks like, as well as best practices on what they need to do when they show up as a substitute teacher, like checking rosters when they get there to make sure that their rosters are up to date, that the teacher left them appropriate rosters in their emergency response bag. We have emergency response bags and folders that go in every one of our classrooms. That include things like evacuation plans, rosters for each one of their class periods, so they know what kids they're supposed to have and when, especially since that's not something that every sub is going to know, especially in the older grades where they're, rotating classes regularly. They're not necessarily aware of each student they're supposed to have. So those rosters are supposed to be kept up to date.
And I mean, that's important when you think about like the Appalachia High shooting. Mm-hmm. It wasn't clear to the school officials even what classroom the student was in, or the teachers didn't know who was there because it's a newly enrolled student. So whether it's keeping track of somebody after an emergency happens, or just making sure that your rosters are up to date so that any given time, if you get a call asking, where is this student, you readily know where everybody is.
Correct. Inside those booklets, they have there's QR codes where they can scan and they go onto our website and look at our webpage that has our different protocols and things like that that they can glance over if they need a refresher. They can even go through that same website and go through the Stop the Bleed interactive online course directly through our website to go through Stop the Bleed training again if that's something they haven't had in a while. So we touch on all of those things and then show them how to use the website to their advantage, where they can have those things readily available so that they're the best prepared they can be. And one of the things that, like I said, it's a modified version of Craze. Over the years, same as you guys, I do a lot of research into all these events that happen. And so I'll take and pull new examples and things. So one that we dive into heavily, obviously, with subs is Nashville. And we look at some of the lessons that, those victims were able to leave us through the wake of that tragedy, and how to prepare our substitute teachers and what can happen if they're not up to speed on what your protocols are.
Hey, that's excellent. I think the other note, it sounds like your department does a lot of things in hard copy, which I would recommend for any sort of critical emergency things. It's difficult for people to use and manipulate a cell phone if they're under stress. It's difficult if people aren't used to using like a panic button badge or things like that.
Oh yeah.
If you're not using something all the time, when you're under acute stress, you're not going to use something well the first time. So having laminated note cards, having 3-ring binders, things like that are great. But if your school system doesn't have that and you're doing a substitute teacher training, make sure that all the teachers have whatever app and have some sort of cursory training in whatever other technology you're using. It makes me think about an incident that happened in Massachusetts last year, where there was a substitute teaching the class, and they had a key command on the keyboard that would set off the active shooter alarm for the school. And the substitute teacher had never been told about that and tried to hit a key command to, share a screen or something and set off the active shooter alarm. And kids were jumping out of the windows of the school, running down the street. They corralled, got everybody back inside. The substitute teacher didn't realize that they had been the one that set it off. So as soon as they were back in class, the substitute teacher tried to share the screen again and set the alarm off a second time. Everybody evacuates, and then they just called it a day. So they never went back to class after that. But that is why your substitutes need the same level of training that your full-time staff have.
Several years ago, we had when we had just rolled out our Raptor emergency alert technology throughout the district. We had our sub training that year, but we rolled that technology out through the school year. We got it that fall, and so we that portion had not been available to teach the subs on before the school year started, and so we were doing I think it was just a evacuation drill, like fire drill type of drill. It wasn't a lockdown, but during the course of that, the sub had downloaded Raptor because we were initiating our drills using Raptor now since we had it. And when she pulled it up and she looked on there and she saw secure, she thought that meant she was supposed to say, yes, I'm secure. And so she initiated as secure, which is a lockout. But she initiated a real one. And so the way our system sets up, that not only notifies us, but it actually, within a certain amount of time, like it notifies law enforcement and outside agencies locally if nobody stops it. And so we had people call, hey, what's going on at the school? Are y'all okay? And we're like, what happened? And so that just plays into the importance, though, of making sure that everybody's on the same page. So that's why we do that now. We'll have another one at the end of July, right before the school year starts, for any of the people who couldn't make it to the first one. That one usually ends up being a lot larger. So we've got a sub list that's 100, 150 large people that like to come and substitute at our district. So we usually have a pretty large group that come through that.
Got it. So Officer Caps is not filling in for seventh grade English class, but you are making sure that whoever does knows the emergency plans for the school. So we've got driving across the state to Kerr County, delivering supplies, doing sub teacher training over the summer. What we plan to talk about today is you were just a presenter at the Texas School Safety Conference, and that's following up on the previous discussion that we had, which is about your district's approach to the state mandate to have armed guardians on every campus during operating hours. So, what did you present, and kind of what was the purpose of your talk there at the School Safety Conference?
Absolutely. So we were, first of all, very honored to be invited to come down and be a presenter. There were some amazing individuals who spoke, and to be in that kind of company was very humbling and very honoring to be invited to do that. And so what we were invited to speak on, or what we had submitted, was basically a how to implement a school guardian program in the state of Texas, with the subtitle of a 10-step framework is what it was called. And so what we spoke on is it started out, we wanted to hit the main, there's three main kind of aspects that people look at and have questions about. The first of which is the legal. So at the very start, we did a legal breakdown of what the different statutes are, as well as what the Texas legislature has just passed in the last month, at the close of our legislative session for this cycle. So like we talked about last time, they meet every 2 years. They were still meeting when you and I spoke last. Just prior to that conference, they had just concluded, and we had just learned what all of the new laws or additions and revisions to statutes were going to be. So in that, we got a couple of good clarifications and additions to laws around guardians. So we did a full breakdown. I spent a couple of weeks prior to that digging into the different statutes to make sure that we had a solid understanding of what came from that legislative session, as well as reaching out to a couple, representatives who had taken part in that to make sure I had it right. And then we were able to present a full breakdown of what that looks like now legally for all of the attendees. And one of the things that came from that was the clarification now as to the difference in what is required to implement guardians to meet the armed officer response law that we talked about last time. Which I had told you last time, they left kind of open, and there were no standards or things to be met. Well, luckily they listened, as several of us had reached out to legislators and things like that over the last couple of years and said, "Hey, this is great, but you need clarification. This can't just be left open like we had it before." So they did. They gave us two clarifications, and they basically put us on two pathways. So if you're going to employ school guardians now in the state of Texas to meet that mandate, you can go one of two ways, one of which is to have each one of your guardians attend the Texas DPS School Safety Certification course that we spoke about last time, and then follow the 4603 Penal Code, which is the one that allows for a school district to give written permission for an individual with a license to carry a weapon on campus. So within that, now there is a standard set that says they have to have that certificate, whereas before it was optional. So that is one option. The second option is that they could, no later than the 90th day after the date on which the employee is hired, to be a guardian to fulfill that role for the mandate, in conjunction with either an ISD police department or a local agency. The district could put their own training program in place to say that they were certified in school, basically in all of the aspects of school safety. With that, that training also had clarification, because it gave you all the things that it had to hit. And those things were active shooter response, which in the law itself states that must be done through alert. So they have to go through the advanced law enforcement rapid response training and do the active shooter response, which would be their alert level 1 course. So that's part A of that. And then B was school safety and emergency management, and then crisis intervention, incident command, first aid administration, mental health, and then qualifications relating to the carrying or the use of a firearm. So all of those points had to be hit in the training if you were going to structure it with in your own school or within your agency. So you had option 1 and option 2. Option 1 was the DPS school safety certificate, which actually covers all of those things in that curriculum already. Or you could do it on your own. And if you do it on your own, then you had to meet all of the other options, as well as abide by the penal code. So they gave us clarification on that, and we were able to present that to I think we had close to 600 or 700 attendees that actually came to our breakout sessions. We did 2 different breakout sessions, and we had quite a lot of attendance in those because this is such a controversial topic, and there was so little information on it. So that was the first aspect that we wanted to hit, was the legal aspect. We wanted to explain it where it was very straightforward, and there were put all the rumors aside of, well, I think you can do this, I think you can do that. It says, no, this is what the legislator says, this is the law, this is how you have to do it. Now, the caveat to that is they did not go in and clarify the use of guardians outside of using them for a mandate. So like we talked about before, in my district, we have school guardians, but we don't need them for the mandate because we do have one officer at each campus. So we're not using the good cause exception for our guardians, but we still employ guardians. So what I'd like to see in the future is that same clarification come out for any employee that is occupying that role. And it's fine if it follows that same framework that they laid out. That I feel like that was a very good clarification and a very good move in the right direction.
And just to clarify there for people who aren't familiar with Texas and the requirements, so there needs to be an armed person on campus during all school operating hours. If you're one of the large kind of well-resourced areas in Dallas or Houston or Austin or San Antonio, you have pretty large school police departments. So you would be able to meet that mandate just with your existing school police department. And then in your case, in Mineola and some other independent school districts, ISDs, some of them have school police departments, in which case that's meeting the mandate. But it's for all of those people that don't have the resources to have a dedicated school police department. Then that's where this option to have a guardian who's a non-sworn police officer is there than the person who's on campus meeting the mandate.
Correct. And I know we went into that a little more in depth on the previous episode, but that same statute didn't get a facelift or anything. That's still in place, the one that came from House Bill 3 in the last legislative session in 2023. So HB 121 for Texas is the one this year that brought some of the new elements of it. The only thing on the good cause exception that it really jumped into was now also districts that do apply for a good cause exception, they have to perform a reevaluation each year annually and look at the status of their armed security response capability and see if they can meet that still with what they had before, or they have come up with a better solution. And if not, they have to reapply annually now. So it does leave or add in a little bit of accountability, so that it's not something they just check off the box once and then 10 years down the road somebody forgot about it and, oh, do we still have enough? I'm not sure. And it doesn't get missed. So now that reevaluation clause got added into that statute. But other than that, the same thing we discussed last time is basically there.
And then I guess since your department has spent a couple years developing this framework, the meat of your discussion was these 10 steps to implementing a guardian program.
Yes.
We talked about that in some detail in the last episode, but you've made some refinements. And then how was this framework received by other departments in Texas that don't have as developed policy?
I think it was received well. The biggest thing that we got was, people who just came to us saying, uh, we wanted this, we've looked at it, and just didn't know where to start. It's really hard to put something like this in place because this is different than, if you want to start a police department, there's 17 different manuals and things that you can pull together that show you exactly what you need to do, step 1, 2, and 3 of how to put it in place, how to make sure it's legally accounted for, how to do all the documentation, things the state's going to require. All of that is there, but there was nothing like that for a guardian program. So what people walked away with were, it's not a hard, none of the steps within this framework are all based on principles. It's not, you must do this, you have to do these things or else you're going to be unsuccessful or you're not going to meet the mandate the way you're supposed to. It's set up to be able to tailor to your own needs within your district. But it's based on principles that you should be at a minimum attempting to have an answer for when you put a program in place to set you up for best practice. And that started with determining the number of guardians that your district needs. Okay. And how do you do that? How do you determine how many is enough? I don't know the answer to that. The one that we came up with that we found that works really good to us is going off of a ratio. We go off of about a 1 to 100. So for every 100 students, if I've got one guardian in the immediate vicinity that can help respond to that area, that seems to work fairly well. And the only way we've been able to test that, obviously, we talked about our false alarm we had earlier in the year on the previous episode, but through active response training with scenarios and putting people through force on force training, we have found that having that number for our size district with the amount of kids that we got, that is a good number to go off of as far as just a general ratio to have enough armed responders to create a good response in our buildings. Considering our buildings are built to hold the amount of kids we have, I would say that if you scale that up to larger districts and you follow that same ratio, you should get the same result. Again, I don't know that for a fact, but it's a good principle. It's a good place to start. And so that was the step number 1, was determining the number of guardians. And then 2, we said you have to select the criterion and type of staff member that's necessary for your program. We don't arm teachers. Classroom teachers don't do us a lot of good, because if we go into a lockdown and they have a class, protocol says that they're to lock the door and stay with that class, turn the lights off, get them in a hard corner, and they're accountable for the students they have in their room. Well, that doesn't do me a lot of good making contact with an active shooter, because I don't want them to open the door once it's closed. I want them to stay with that class. So we don't look for teachers. What we're looking for are people who, and then this, how we presented this, we gave them kind of the bullet points of what to be looking for. Someone who can actually respond quickly and immediately in the event of an active threat. They can remain mobile and unaffected by lockdown protocols that would confine other staff members to their classrooms or designated areas, have limited physical interaction with students that could lead to exposure of a concealed weapon. So where they're not one of those people that are constantly hugging on kids in their role, not just as their personality, but in their role. Not necessarily your librarian who comes out and is sitting in the corner reading with the kids. There's a good chance she's going to get busted.
You don't want the basketball coach where
right.
the holster flips out.
Exactly.
Practice, which that has happened a couple times.
Oh yeah, no, I've seen it as well at other places who were doing it differently than we are. And then I also want any of those individuals chosen to have a primal knowledge of the district's buildings and facilities. Not just their classroom or their area or their gym. I want them to have a knowledge of the whole district and all the facilities and the ins and outs. So ones that we like to go after, 1 are administrators, because they're perfect for that role. 2 is your maintenance workers, custodians. They're also excellent for that role. Counselors are excellent in that role, Because not only that, but there's a good chance that they have dealt with and or may know the individual committing that act and may have a chance to prevent violence if they make an immediate response to it. So really looking into selecting those individuals that are going to be a part of the program is step two. And then three would be establishing training requirements. So we go further than just the initial training, and we try to show them what requirements they need to have in place, and that it needs to be continuous. Not that initial training is not enough. We talk about it, but then we talk about what they have to do and the standards they have to be able to meet. And that leads us into step four, which is determining qualifications and evaluation standards. And that goes into several aspects that we kind of keyed on for them to think about. One would be marksmanship. Two is tactics and crisis management. And then three would be your pass rate. What are you going to determine is a high enough level of proficiency to say that these people can go do this? And my answer to that was always to them, well, how good of a grade would you want them to get on the test if it was your child they were standing next to with that firearm? Well, I don't want the guy who made a 70 and only got 70% of his hits on the paper, right? I want the guy who never missed. So it needs to be a high enough standard that is achievable, but also that represents true proficiency in what they're doing. So
I'll drop a link in the show notes into this because I'm sure it's a program that you're familiar with, but the Marine Corps recently changed a lot of the shooting standards and the way that you now have a dynamic scoring system where it's around having lethal shots early, having lethal shots quickly, but having considerable markdowns for complete misses, because every one of those bullets has significant consequences in either direction.
And a lot of that came from feedback from the competition shooting world, where a lot of the competition world has gone to what they call a hit factor scoring, which is a combination of time versus marksmanship, where you're actually looking at it judges more of your actual proficiency with a weapon, not just like if I have all day long, I can stand there and drill a bullseye out all day as long as I got all the time in the world to make that perfect shot. But when you're putting stress and time on it, it changes the game, and you're actually looking at a proficiency evaluation over just a accuracy score. And so that's the Marine Corps has done that. The Army is implementing programs similar to that, especially with the Army Marksmanship Unit. They're very active in the competition world and have seen the value of that. And that's the kind of thing that needs to directly correlate to programs like this. You need to be gauging your evaluation standards off of true proficiency. So outside of those that we talked about in the first one, outside that pass rate, what evaluations are you actually holding? It's not just marksmanship. I mentioned tactics and crisis management. And in that, we talked to them about, skills tests that should be administered that evaluate the Guardian's decision making, their situational awareness, their effective response in accordance with protocols, the way they know the protocols within the school and the policies, and effectively responding within those protocols to that way they're not just Wild West, OK Corral out here blowing and going, to hold them accountable and actually show proficiency in being good at this. I have cops that will hammer me all the time because when we start talking about active shooter response, I'll tell them, man, I'll take 5 of my Guardians all day long over 20 cops. And they'll be like, oh, you're saying cops are better than, or your Guardians are better than cops? And I said, no. I said, they can't go serve a warrant at a trailer house, but they can stop a shooter in a school. Because that's what I need them to be good at. I don't need them to be good at being a cop. I need them to know how to be an expert at active shooter response. So that's what they train at becoming proficient at. And then the follow-on to that is everything beyond it. The crisis management, incident command, the medical aspect. All these guys, we recommended that they go through advanced medical training. Our guys go through TCCC training as well as Stop the Bleed, CPR certifications, and they are able to transition from stopping the killing to stopping the dying mid scenario, whether they have killed the shooter or terminated the shooter, or the shooter is just isolated. So as long as they have isolated the shooter and set security where there's no threat for more killing to commence, then they know how to hold that position, and the rest of them shift into stopping the dying to
Yeah,
help
and I think
stop
that
preventable deaths.
yeah, that's a tactic that gets left out of a lot of the active shooter training, not just in
No,
schools, but
it's like
in
about
all
all of them.
places. And it's
All of them.
important if you look at, say, the video from Central Visual and Performing Arts High School in St.
Mhm.
Louis. That's a former student who's very familiar with this school. He has an AR-15 and about 600 rounds in magazines in his backpack. And he ends up on the third floor of the school. He's waiting in the hallway for the officers to come. Once the officers are there, he fires at them, and then he retreats back into a computer lab.
Yep.
And they know that the computer lab's vacant. Like there's nobody in there. And then at that point, they
all converge on the shooter,
yeah,
and nobody is paying attention to the victims who are in need of critical emergency triage, but they get sucked into that active part of it, and that is such a huge gap.
Yeah, you risk
getting training right now.
Getting shot going through a door.
Right.
You risk friendly fire as multiple officers are moving through a door.
Where all you got to do is hold that guy.
Yep.
Once he's isolated and the killing has stopped, I have he can stay there all afternoon. I don't care. I can wait until I get 15 shields and SWAT guys in here to handle. That's just a barricaded suspect at that point. And we watch them out on the street, wait those guys out for 8 hours at a time.
Yeah,
and he's going to do one of two. He'll do one of three things. He's going to give up. He's going to end it himself, or we're going to get enough people there that we can do it without the risk of anybody getting hurt.
Exactly. And I think what gets missed in a lot of the active shooter responses and the school responses is if you can get somebody to surrender, then you're going to have an opportunity to interview them and find out what happened and figure out the pathway to violence, figure out their motivation, figure out if there were other people that they were communicating with online. If they're dead, you don't get to do any of that. You don't get to have a trial for the parents to be able to get closure. David, that is such an important thing.
You know, it's a catch-22, right? Because I can see both sides of the coin. These law enforcement officers who are responding have spent a career at this point watching our system fail time and time again. Cases fall through, guys get off for things they shouldn't have, probation handed out because the jail was full and then people ended up back on the street. And so they see a situation like this and some of the most violent and vile things you could ever imagine, someone going in and going after children. And I can see the frustration and the drive for them to end it right then and there, knowing that if they don't, there's a chance that could fall through the cracks in our system. So I see the frustration on their side, but also for any chance for us to, like you said, dig into the pathway to violence and start getting better systems in place to stop this before it happens. We've got to be able to proactively address every elephant in the room in the midst of that chaos, which is very hard to train. And that's why we emphasize, even with our guardians, the importance of the frequency and consistency of good training throughout all of these aspects that we laid out in this framework, because it's not a one-stop shop. You can't take them out there and make them perfect shots and think that they're going to be good at stopping a bad guy. You got to cover the whole spectrum.
Yeah, the last point on, that importance of being able to interview a suspect, I think about the December shooting at a Christian school in Madison, Wisconsin, where it was a 14-year-old girl. Yeah. Now, she ended it herself before police arrived. Right. But if there had been an opportunity, she was having close online contact with at least 3 other people, one who committed a school shooting also in Nashville in January, and then 2 men in their 20s. One was planning an attack at government buildings in Florida, another at government buildings in Southern California. If you could have had an opportunity to arrest and interview her, there are probably multiple plots involving
Oh
lots of
yeah.
different people that you could have a profound impact on. So I think that's just something that,
Well, and also
whether it's an
just
investigation or an arrest, remember how connected every one of these incidents are, even
absolutely.
when it's a 14-year-old girl who's at the center of it.
Absolutely. And then on looking at that, the almost the same way on the school side, throughout the rest of this framework, we talk about equipment considerations in one point, and then the biggest one, probably the one we got the most feedback on, is that documentation and liability considerations. And looking at, like you were talking about, everything just being interconnected. This is not like I wrote all this down and had the privilege of presenting it to people, but I didn't come up with this. I didn't reinvent the wheel. I'm regurgitating things I've seen through law enforcement, through private security, through the military, working and seeing how we organized, how we documented, how we tracked training, and the things that were always important were always the same, right? And so all I'm doing is regurgitating that in here to give you options of things you need to be looking at, like qualification forms. How often are you qualifying? Is once a year enough, or is just going through the certification course enough? Well, again, what if it was your kid? What would you want that guy to have? Well, I want to know that they're staying on top of it. So, like our group qualifies 4 times a year, every quarter, which we break up into the school year. We go from July to June, as opposed to January to December. So from July to June, they've got, within that first 3 months, they have to get a 90% or higher qualification. The next 3 months, they have to have a 90% or higher qualification. And if they're not there, they're pulled from the program, not pulled from the program, but they're taken off active status, and they're not allowed to carry anymore until they go through remedial training and can get back up to that level. Luckily, we haven't had to do that, because we train every single, well, we train it they train once a month. Every month they get together and train, but they actually, our guardians are training every week within the month, because they're split into teams. So we take a different team out every week, within the 4 weeks of the month, and we train a different team every week to keep them in small groups, to keep the training um, just more efficient. You can't take 30 people out there and expect them to all to maintain the same level. You got to break it down to a smaller group to get them to actually help work through problems, work through issues, help gain efficiency. Because when you have those giant groups, you're only going to be as good as the slowest guy out there. That's as fast as you can go. And then digging in further than that, another big one that we got a lot of feedback on was the oversight and the administrative note, which was number 7 on there, and that was just you have to have someone that is running it. You have to have someone that's willing to step up and has enough knowledge within these areas. Doesn't have to be an expert in it, but they have to know where to go look to get experts in it, or figure out how to put it together and use resources likewise, and how to organize it and make sure that it's moving forward, and to keep that accountability piece built in. And if you don't have that, then you're going to lose that, and you're always going to have that question of if, right? And then with our next point would be anonymity. With the program, we just kind of talk about the importance of anonymity, and the fact that these aren't security guards. They're not wearing a uniform. The beauty of this program is, and we talk about it with our community all the time about our Guardian program, is we make it well known, and that's actually number 9 is community transparency. You can't put something in place like this and then not tell your community what's going on, not tell parents what's going on. You have to be 100% open and transparent with them, and part of doing that adds into the not ruse, but the overall outlook from the community as having them in place as a deterrent. Because one of the things we constantly say is, for every gun you see in the crowd, there's 5 you don't. And they're trained. And they're not only trained, but they're well trained. They train every month. They train more than our local cops. And when our community starts to see that and realize that, they're like, oh man. So they show up to a football game or to some type of get together at the school where we're bringing an assembly, right? And they see 3 peace officers, 3 police officers out there. Right off the bat, if they're just going off of what we said, they know that there's at a minimum 15 other armed individuals in there, professionals, ready to stop them if they want to do something stupid. And I'll say for most normal functioning thinking people, that's a pretty big deterrent, because you're automatically knowing that you're going to be overgunned and overpowered pretty quickly. And if you're looking to make a statement going out, that's going to deter quite a few people. But if you don't have that transparency, that doesn't work with your community. So that's a solid point. That's point number 9 in our 10-step framework, is community transparency. And it just doesn't survive without it. It's critical. And then the last one being law enforcement interaction, which has to be frequent. We talk about coordinated responses, regular joint training with law enforcement, clear communication, and then clear and concise methods for identifying your guardians in the case of an actual active incident. And then we gave a lot of demonstrations from the different things we use, between the DSM sashes to body armor that's got bright yellow chartreuse marking, says Guardian on it, to hats, to their identification cards, all these different means to make sure you don't run the risk of having that blue on blue incident, as well as the big thing being your local law enforcement, the ones, your ISD cops for sure, because they should be if you have guardians in conjunction with ISD police, there's no reason they shouldn't be training together all the time. But then bringing in your local, whether it's a PD or a county, and making sure that they are coming in and training in these schools also, and knowing who those guys are, getting used to knowing, hey, when we go in here, there's going to be guardians in here. All right. Here are all the ways that they're going to be marked. When you see yellow, you identify first, or whatever it might be, that way you don't run the risk of having that incident. And when you work that together and you get those coordinated responses going, you end up with I'm not going to say seamless, but a very efficient response that force multiplies at a rate that you couldn't imagine when it comes to actual active shooter response within a situation like being in a school.
And your point earlier, we were talking about you can't have too much water post natural disaster. You can't have too many agencies involved in a training, because when you look at the after action reports for any of these shootings, whether it's Parkland or Uvalde or Nashville, there are dozens, if not close to 100 different agencies that show up. Because once you realize that you might have, if it's in, East Texas, Border Patrol is all over there, but you also have U.S. Marshals, you have FBI agents, you have ATF agents, you have your state police, you have all of your surrounding counties, you have all of your surrounding county school departments, but then you have all these obscure federal agencies that you don't even know. You might have the U.S. Mint Police were just in the area for a training, and next thing you know, 4 of those officers happen to be,
we've got show up. You get the same thing down here on the state level. We've got a state park right up the road. Well, state parks in Texas have state park police who are state law enforcement. You've got game wardens who are going to be coming in for anything like that. You got the TABC agents, right? The Alcohol Beverage Commission, who may be in the area running audits. You've got TEA agents, all right? The education agency. Those are peace officers that can also respond. And those are just a handful of the ones that you don't think about. Then you've got local, county, DPS, FBI. We've got a local FBI office right down the road. They're going to be coming. You may have any number of these people coming in strong, and that's just law enforcement. Now you also have to add in fire, EMS, emergency management from the city getting involved. If you're in a municipal area, who's going to handle that for the county? All right, are they NIMS trained? Or do they understand incident management situation in training there? But if you can take a group of individuals like guardians and you instill all of those things within the framework of your program, where these guys they may not be the experts, and overall, they're going to hand jurisdiction off pretty quickly. But if they're establishing that within minutes from the inside out in the incident of one of these responses, then you don't end up with the cluster of chaos that a lot of these previous incidents have gone into that have caused the loss of life because no one knew what was going on.
Yeah, and I mean that's not just Uvalde. I think before
No.
Uvalde,
Mm-mm.
I went to dozens of after action report briefings about the Boston Marathon bombing.
Oh yeah.
And I think the most interesting part of that was when they finally knew where the bomber was in the back of the boat, why it took so long to get there. And that was because every officer from every jurisdiction in that area showed up, parked, ditched their patrol car, and you had blocks of abandoned patrol cars, so you couldn't get the bomb trucks through.
Yeah.
So I think, great point that you make there. If you're doing training, whether it's with school staff, whether it's with law enforcement, whether it's with the Guardian program, anywhere in the country, invite every possible agency that you can think of. If they don't show up, they don't show up. But don't worry about having too many people, and don't worry about overextending your training, because it's going to be the real world.
What I will say is from our experience and after doing this for several years, the other thing that I'll add to that is also don't get discouraged when they don't show up. You're going to have to fight tooth and nail to get some of these guys to come train with you, to come train with your guys, train in your schools, learn your protocols, and they're never going to meet your expectation, but getting them at least familiar with it helps them walk into what was an unknown, but now isn't quite as much. And anytime you can do that in law enforcement, the more information that you have, the better your response is going to be. Whereas walking in and going, hey, there's 2 Guardians down there, and knowing what those guys, it just having come to one training and just witnessed it, whether you didn't even step foot out there and do a run yourself, you just watched. Being able to walk away and come into a real life situation now and seeing those guys going, hey, man, I know they probably got this thing handled. Let's see what's going on and how we can help. As opposed to running in going, get on the ground, get on the ground. The cops are here now. We got it. We'll take it from here. No. You have to acknowledge that force multiplication capability when you have a force like this and use them as an advantage, not someone who's in your way. Don't assume that you're the best one for the job. Right. And when you see that, you can go into a situation having that understanding and those acknowledgments and create an efficient response as opposed to a constant headbutting of who's going to do this. Well, we're the ones with the badge. Well, we already got him locked down, bro. He's right over here. Here, go ahead and take him. But we can hold security. Why don't you guys help us organize this rescue team and get these casualties moved to the casualty collection point?
Yeah, it's a great point. So for my last question for you, because we're running out of time here. So you've got the rest of the summer, and then we're already going to be into the 25-26 school year. Coming out of developing the 10-step framework, which you presented at the state safety conference, what's your big priority going forward into the next school year? What's kind of the big goal you're trying to accomplish?
So for one, we want I want to have a new level. I want to take my group to another level. We initiated a new qualification last year because the one we started with just wasn't adequate to show their actual level of proficiency. So they actually stepped it up, and they're doing a pretty intense qualification level now. I want that to become a standard yearly thing where they're updating and it's getting harder and harder because they're getting better and better. So I would like to see throughout our training over the next year that becomes a standard yearly goal, is that we have to make a harder qual every year for them because of how much better they're getting on their marksmanship proficiency. But then also our in the hallway training. My goal is to, by summer 2026, host a multi-level agency training where we have at a minimum our local city, county, and then our two different providers for emergency medical response and our local fire involved, to a point where it is an evaluation training because they have trained with us consistently throughout the year on these concepts. Our local fire and some of our local law enforcement have started. Our local fire agency has been very involved so far, and learning these things and seeing what these emergency like these rescue teams look like and how to go into the hot zone with armed security and get casualties out even when the shooter may still be active, or not neutralized but isolated. They've seen what that is, to the point where they've gone out and actually started outfitting their trucks with body armor for their guys, where they can throw body armor on to go in with our guardians and get casualties out. So that's come a long way so far. I'd like to see that progress to the point where when we get to next summer, that we've had so much involvement from them throughout the year that it's more of an evaluation as opposed to a first time seeing it. So that's one of our big goals for the year, is to gain more of that involvement from our interagency response capability, and to get to a point where next summer we're looking at that training as an evaluation as opposed to a first look.
Oh, sounds good. In the show notes, I'm going to put the 10-step framework as well as a link to the presentation from the Texas School Safety Conference. So Officer Seth Capps is with the Mineola ISD Police Department. He is the program director for the Armed School Guardians. That's not to be confused with Guardian Jiu-Jitsu that was also one of the guests on this show. A little bit different. But they're operating down there in Texas. If you have any questions, Seth's info is also in the show notes. And I have a feeling that if you are wondering about armed staff in your school or training or anything related to school policing, reach out to him. He'd probably be more than happy to talk to you. So, Seth, thanks for your time.
Absolutely.
Thanks for everything you're doing in Texas, and stay safe this summer.
Thanks, David. Thanks for having us again, man.